The stars outside the patrol ship looked calm, like tiny diamonds floating in space. Officer Jack Rayner leaned back in his seat. Yawning. "This sector's dead quiet," he muttered, glancing at his alien partner, Syria. She was tall, with violet skin and silver eyes that never blinked enough for Jack's liking. "Too quiet," Syria replied, her voice sharp like a blade. She tapped her clawed fingers across the console, scanning for signals. Jack had worked with her for almost a year now, and when she said something felt wrong, she was usually right, suddenly. A faint signal popped up on the screen. "Unregistered ship, drifting near the gravity belt," Syria said, narrowing her eyes. "No ID, no response to comms." Jack frowned. His casual mood vanishing. "Could be pirates," he said, standing up and grabbing his gear. "Or smugglers," Syria added, already preparing to dock. There. Patrol ship pulled closer to the floating cargo vessel. It looked old, rusted, with parts of its hull burned from plasma fire. But what caught their attention was the emergency beacon blinking weakly. Someone had activated it recently. They docked and entered carefully, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air inside was cold and smelled like metal and decay. "No bodies," Jack whispered, "but signs of struggle." Scorch marks lined the walls, and one door was partially melted, as if someone tried to burn their way in or out. They reached the cargo hold and froze. Crates, dozens of them, stacked side by side, sealed tight. Each crate had strange marking symbols from different alien worlds. Jack stepped closer to one and touched its side, feeling a low hum beneath. His fingers, he looked at Syria. "These aren't just storage crates," she nodded, already scanning with her device. "There's life inside," she whispered, eyes wide. Jack's heart pounded as he opened the first crate. Inside, curled up like a sleeping animal, was a small alien child, thin, bruised, breathing shallow but alive. "Oh no," Jack breathed. "They're smuggling kids." Syria opened another crate and another more children, all unconscious, barely breathing. Different species, different ages, all stuffed in like cargo. The sight made Jack feel sick. "These crates are rigged with stasis fields," Syria said. "Cheap ones, unstable." That's when the lights flickered and the whole ship groaned. "Self-destruct protocol," Syria said sharply, pointing at the flashing red symbols on the wall. Someone didn't want them found. They didn't have time to open all the crates. Jack grabbed one child, Syria grabbed another, and together they ran. Triggering their emergency beam out, the ship exploded behind them just seconds. After they warped back into their patrol vessel, the rest of the children were gone. Silence filled the cockpit as the stars returned to their windows. Two small alien kids lay wrapped in blankets behind them, unmoving but alive. Jack sat down slowly, hands shaking. "They were going to kill them," he whispered. Like trash, Syria didn't speak for a long time, her eyes fixed on the stars. Finally, she said, "We need to find out who did this and why." The patrol ship turned toward the nearest safe outpost. But Jack already knew this was no ordinary patrol anymore. Something darker was happening across the stars. Someone was collecting children, hiding them, selling them, maybe worse. And now that Jack and Syria had saved even two, whoever was behind it would come looking. Jack glanced back at one of the kids. A small creature with blue skin and glowing freckles. The child stirred, eyes fluttering open weakly. When she saw Jack, she didn't scream or cry. She whispered one word in a broken voice. "Papa." Jack froze, heartbreaking. He didn't know who she was, or why she said it, but in that moment, he made a silent promise. He wouldn't let her be taken again, no matter what it cost. Jack sat beside the medical bed. Watching the small alien girl sleep, her breathing was steady now, but too slow. Like she hadn't fully recovered, the ship's medbay hummed quietly. Filled with soft beeping and the faint scent of sterilized air, Syria stood at the far corner. Arms crossed, watching the other child, an older boy with green skin and orange eyes. He hadn't spoken a word since they were rescued, just stared at everything like it might hurt him. Jack leaned forward and whispered, "Who are you, little one?" The girl stirred again, eyes fluttering open. She stared at him with tired curiosity, then whispered the same word as before. Papa Jack's heart clenched. He didn't correct her. She needed comfort, not confusion. Back at Outpost 17, alarms had gone off as soon as they docked. Medical teams rushed in. Shocked by what Jack and Syria brought back, children bruised and starved, pulled from a cargo ship meant to explode. Jack had never seen the commander so pale. "You found what?" he asked in disbelief. Syria showed the data scan from the ship, the stasis signatures, and the internal logs the logs had been mostly corrupted, but one thing remained, a strange symbol burned into every crate. It didn't belong to any known planet or government, just a circle with jagged lines like claws reaching inward in the quiet corner of the station. Jack and Syria watched over the kids. More tests came in, and the news was worse than expected. The girl's brain had been tampered with. Not just stasis sickness, but something more programming. Her memories were damaged, like pieces had been ripped away and replaced with fear. Syria held the scan pad and said softly, "Someone tried to erase who she was." Jack clenched his jaw, looking at the girl's tiny hand curled around his finger. Why would anyone do this? Syria didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to the boy and knelt beside him. "Do you have a name?" she asked gently. The boy looked at her, blinked once, then turned his head away, but his eyes flicked toward the med console near the bed. Jack followed his gaze and saw something strange. The screen had changed, displaying a slow-moving red dot. A tracker signal. Jack stood up fast. "We've been marked." The station lights flickered just for a moment, barely noticeable, but enough to set Jack on edge. Syria immediately began scanning for breaches. A ping echoed through the room. Something had activated deep in the station's lower levels. A hidden signal. Jack tapped the comms. "Lock down the med bay now." No one responded. The doors suddenly slid shut on their own. Locking with a hiss, Jack drew his weapon, his eyes darting around the room. He didn't like this. The air felt heavier. Syria was already pulling the panel off the wall, trying to force a manual override. "I think we're being jammed," she said. From inside the station, the boy stood up slowly and walked toward Jack. He reached out and pointed to the wall vent. Without a word, he was warning them. Jack stepped toward it, weapon raised. Just as the vent cover burst open, a dark figure lunged from the shadows. Blade in hand, Jack fired instantly. Knocking the intruder to the floor, Syria leaped forward, pinning the attacker down, her claws at their throat. The figure wore a black mask, no insignia, no sound, a professional. He carried no ID, no communication device, just a single chip embedded in his wrist. When Jack scanned it, a single word came up on the screen. Collector. Syria froze. That name was not new. She had heard rumors about a being who paid high credits for stolen alien children. Not for ransom, not for rescue, for selling them to private buyers, black market adoptions, off-grid cloning projects. Or worse. Jack stared at the word on the screen, his fingers shaking. They were never supposed to survive. He whispered, "That ship." It was a grave, a moving tomb. Syria looked at the attacker, was still breathing, but unconscious. This one came to finish the job. The girl suddenly cried out in fear, curling into a ball under the blanket. The boy rushed to her side, hugging her tight. Jack took a deep breath and knelt beside them. "We won't let them take you," he said, voice trembling. "Not ever again." They had 2 children rescued, 1 attacker captured, and 1 name collector. But that name alone wouldn't stop. What was coming? Jack looked at Syria. "We need to find where these kids came from," he said, "and how many are still out there." Syria nodded once. Her voice was calm, but deadly. "Then we begin with this one," she said, looking down at the masked man on the floor, "and make him talk." The prisoner didn't scream, even when the pain began. Kay didn't beg, didn't speak. Kay not a single word, not even when Syria used her claws to dig into the nerves near his implant. Kay just looked at them with blank eyes, like a machine wearing flesh. Jack watched from the other side of the glass, fists clenched. The children were resting in a protected wing now, guarded by armed medics and locked doors. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that more enemies were coming. If this assassin got through, others could too. Inside the room, Syria paused, her claws bloody, but her voice calm. "I know what you are," she whispered to the man. "You're not loyal, not trained, just bought." She tapped her scanner against the implant on his neck. The screen blinked once access denied. The chip was firewalled, meant to self-destruct if tampered with too deeply. She looked at him again, this time with pity. "Even your mind isn't yours." Suddenly, his eyes flickered just for a second. Jack leaned closer to the glass. "Did you see that?" he said, overcomes. Syria turned her head, nodding once. The man's face twitched again, like something inside was breaking free. Then, in a low, cracking voice, he whispered, "They are coming." Syria froze. Who? But his head jerked, like something zapped. His brain, he coughed blood and collapsed. Jack rushed in as Syria checked for a pulse. "He's alive, but barely," she said. His implant tried to shut him down. Jack stared at the man. "Then someone's watching us." Outside the room, a new alert came in. One of the children, the boy with green skin, was awake and speaking. Jack ran to the medwing, finding the child sitting upright, gripping the blanket like it was armor. Syria followed, kneeling in front of him. The boy's voice was quiet, but clear. "They used numbers, not names," he said. "I was 4, she was 5. Jack stepped forward, kneeling beside Syria. "How many were there?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. 12. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the gut. 10 were still missing. Maybe dead, maybe worse. The boy looked around nervously and said, "The collector lives in the cold place." With the mirrors, Syria's eyes met Jack's. That description wasn't random. It matched an old rumor from deep space, a black market facility, hidden inside a frozen asteroid where every wall reflected your own fear. A place that didn't exist on any map, but was whispered in criminal code as refraction. They had a location, or at least a starting point. But the mission was dangerous. Jack looked at the 2 children and made his choice. "I'm going," he said. "With or without backup." Syria put a hand on his shoulder. "With." The outpost commander refused official support. Too risky, too far, too little evidence. So Jack and Syria took a private scout vessel off the records. It was small, fast, and armed just enough to get in and out. The children were left under special care, guarded by 2 trusted officers and an AI security system. Before they left, the girl number 5 handed Jack a small charm. It was nothing more than a bit of wire shaped like a star, but she placed it in his hand and whispered, "Come back." Jack nodded without speaking, pocketing the charm like it was sacred. The journey to the frozen asteroid took 13 hours. No signals, no chatter. Just silence between stars. Syria finally spotted something strange on the scanner heat bloom inside solid ice. They approached slowly, hiding behind debris fields and old satellites. Then they saw it, a black structure buried in the ice, like a giant eye staring up from the dark. And in the center glass, shining glass, reflecting stars that didn't exist. "This is it," Jack said. "Refraction." They powered down the engines and drifted closer. No alarms, no defense drones. Just a silent hangar door, opening as if waiting for them. Jack's heart pounded. Something about this place felt wrong, like they were being welcomed into a trap. They landed, stepping into the hangar with weapons ready. The lights were dim, the air cold, and every wall reflected their faces from strange angles. Jack whispered, "Let's find the kids." But Syria didn't move. She was staring at her own reflection, except her mirror self was smiling. "She wasn't, Jack," she said slowly. "The reflections, they're moving on their own." Jack turned toward his own and watched as his reflection raised a gun before he did. Jack pulled the trigger. But the reflection fired first. A flash of light burst from the mirror reel, not illusion. The beam grazed Jack's shoulder, burning through fabric and flesh. He fell back with a shout. Clutching his arm, Syria dragged him behind a cargo container as the wall in front of them cracked open. It wasn't a mirror, it was a screen. A weaponized one. Jack cursed under his breath. "This place is alive." Syria scanned the area quickly, her hands shaking for the first time. "This isn't just glass," she said. "It's hard-light tech used in illusion fields. Elite defense systems. They weren't in a building. They were inside a trap made of light and lies." Footsteps echoed, but they came from every direction. One shadow split into two. Then four. The reflections multiplied, all carrying weapons, all mimicking Jack and Syria's movements. Jack tried to tell which one was real, but his head was spinning. Every direction looked the same. Every sound bounced back wrong. "This place is a maze," he said, breathing hard. "And we're the rats." Syria opened a pack from her belt and threw a tiny disc into the air. It released a pulse, disrupting the holograms around them. Some reflections flickered and vanished. Others stayed, still moving. Those were the real enemies. Now they knew where to aim. A firefight began, loud and fast. Jack fired at a tall figure. In his reflection, dropping it with one hit, Syria leaped high, claws glowing, slashing through another attacker. But the enemy didn't scream, didn't bleed. Just collapsed silent, artificial. "They're not alive," she shouted. Constructs, as they cleared a path, something odd happened. The walls shifted, reshaping like melting ice. A door appeared at the end of the corridor. Glowing faintly, Jack glanced at Syria. "It's inviting us in," she nodded. "Let's not keep it waiting." They stepped through the door, guns raised, and found something they didn't expect. A room not mirrored. Not dark, but bright and warm. Toys scattered across the floor, drawings taped to the walls. And in the center, 6 children, all wide-eyed and silent. Number 3, number 7. Number 9, Jack counted them by their tags. They were alive, huddled together like animals. Staring at him with fear, Jack lowered his weapon and slowly knelt. "We're not here to hurt you," he said gently. One child stepped forward. A girl with golden skin and glowing fingertips. "You're real," she whispered. "Not glass," he nodded. "I'm Jack. This is Syria. We came to take you home." The children said nothing, just looked at each other. Then one boy pointed to a vent at the far wall. "He went that way," the boy said. "The man with metal eyes." Jack froze. "Metal eyes," he repeated. Syria's face turned cold. "I've heard of him," she said. "That's the collector." They had found the missing children, but not the monster behind it all. And now he knew they were here. Jack helped gather the kids quickly, calming them, telling them they were safe. But the lights flickered again, and a voice echoed through the walls, low, calm, and terrifying. "You shouldn't have come." It said, "Now you belong to me." The exit sealed behind them. The room began to shift once more, the walls folding like paper, reshaping into a different space. A long hall stretched ahead, lined with tubes, each holding a child moving frozen in blue light. Some were empty, shattered, others were still. occupied more than 12, maybe 30. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This is a factory. He whispered, a storage for lives. Syria looked at one of the tubes, her eyes narrow. This one's human. Inside the glass floated a boy. No older than 8, dark hair, bruised skin. Lips pale, Jack couldn't move for a moment. He felt like he was staring at his own nephew. How did a human child end up here? He muttered. This is too big, Syria. The lights changed, color deep red now. Then came footsteps, loud and slow. From the end of the corridor, something approached. The children hid behind Jack, clutching his legs. Even Syria stepped back a little. Out of the shadows came a tall figure dressed in a silver cloak. His face was smooth metal, no mouth, no eyes, only glowing sensors. He didn't walk like a man. He glided like a machine built to look human. I offer what the universe refuses. The collector said, voice like echoing steel, purpose for the forgotten. Jack raised his weapon, hand trembling with fury. You steal children, he shouted. You turn them into things. The collector tilted his head. They were always things. 2 people like you, he replied. But not to me, Jack. Fired, the blast hit the collector straight in the chest. The cloak fell. But the body inside was gone, just wires and smoke, a projection, a decoy, and then, behind them, the real door closed, trapping them again. The walls were smooth again, but now they pulsed, like they were breathing. Jack slammed his fists against the sealed door, but it didn't budge. Syria scanned the walls, trying to find seams, weak points, escape routes. Nothing. The children huddled near the corner, afraid to speak. Even the bravest among them, number 3, held back tears. We're in a living prison, Syria muttered. A shifting system controlled by his AI. Jack shook his head, not just to eye him, the collector. He turned toward the kids, crouching down. Do any of you know another way out? Silence followed, till the golden-skinned girl from before raised her hand slowly. There's a hole in the floor, under the fake wall, she whispered, but only little ones can fit. Syria looked around and spotted a shimmering part of the wall that didn't reflect properly. Jack rushed over and touched it. His hand went through. An illusion. Behind it was a crawl space barely large enough for a child to slide in. Jack looked at the kids, then at Syria. I'll boost them through, he said. You guide them with your scanner. Syria hesitated. We split up. We risk too much. Jack nodded. And if we stay, we die. The first child slipped through the hole, then the second. Each one vanished into the narrow tunnel. Following Syria's directions over the comlink, it was working until the 4th child. The boy called number 9 stopped moving halfway through. Jack bent down. What is it? I hear something, the boy whispered. Metal sounds. Jack's blood turned cold. Suddenly, from above, the ceiling groaned, and a hatch opened. 3 mechanical drones dropped down thin, fast, with needle arms and glowing red eyes. Security enforcers, but twisted. They didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. They came straight for Jack. He fired fast, blasting the first one mid-air. The second got close, slicing the air near his throat. He ducked, rolled, fired again. The third grabbed his arm, injecting something cold and burning. Jack screamed, his vision blurred. But he held the trigger and fired blind. The drone fell, sizzling. Syria returned just in time to drag Jack away from the smoke. She slapped a stim patch on his neck and shouted, "Stay awake." Jack blinked rapidly, his head clearing just enough to speak. Are the kids safe? They're crawling to the waist. Shoot, it leads to the lower hangar. She replied, but now we need to get there too. Jack leaned on Syria as they moved, stepping over sparking metal. They followed the tunnel system through vents and narrow walkways. Every turn was filled with mirrors and flickering lights. The collector was toying with them, speaking through the walls in a voice that sounded closer each time. "You can't take them," he said softly. "They belong to me now." Syria ignored the voice, focused on her scanner. Finally, they reached a broken panel beyond. It was a massive chamber, the lower hangar, just like the kids described. But it wasn't empty. Ships small, dark, fast lined the bay, each marked with slave tags. Some were already loaded with stasis pods, ready to launch. Jack's rage boiled over. They were shipping them out. He growled like parcels. Syria placed a hand on his shoulder. "Later," she said. "Right. Now? We need to stop the launch." They moved quickly, setting explosive charges on the docking clamps. Jack hacked the controls while Syria guarded the corridor. Alarms began to scream. Lights flashing red, the collector had noticed. Jack activated the last charge and turned to Syria. Now the room shook as the clamps exploded, sending the ships crashing back into the hangar walls. One burst into flames, another toppled sideways, crushing crates full of illegal tech from the shadows. More drones came swarming, dozens of them, but the children were already at the far end. Crawling through the last chute to the surface level, Syria covered them with fire. Picking off drones one by one, Jack stayed behind, holding the exit gate, shouting, "Go! Go!" The last child turned and ran back toward Jack. It was number 9. He held out something, a glowing chip he had pulled from the vent system. "I found this," he cried. "It's the core file." Jack grabbed it and pushed the boy through the exit. Sealing the hatch behind him, the chip flickered in his hand. Still warm, Syria looked at it, wide-eyed. "This is the collector's operating key," she said. "We can shut the whole station down." Jack slid it into his wrist console, initiating the override. But just before it activated, a new voice echoed colder, deeper. "You should have left when you had the chance." The floor beneath them dropped open, and they fell down into the dark heart of the station where the real collector waited. The fall felt endless. Jack and Syria tumbled through a black chute, twisting as the metal walls shifted around them. Gravity didn't feel right. 1 second too heavy, the next too light. Then suddenly, they hit solid ground. "Hard," Jack groaned, rolling to his side, feeling pain spark through his ribs. Syria landed beside him, breathing fast but already moving. They were underground now, deeper than the station maps had ever shown. The room around them wasn't made of steel or glass. It was stone, old and cold, carved with symbols that glowed faint blue. This wasn't part of the collector's tech, it was ancient, alive in a different way. Jack looked up and saw no ceiling. Only shadows shifting above, like clouds trying to take shape, and in the center of the room, floating just above the ground, was a throne. The throne wasn't empty. A figure sat upon it, tall, thin, and motionless. The collector, in his true form, no cloak this time, no hologram. His body was thin metal and bone, wrapped in living cables. His face was half mask, half scoused skull, with one glowing eye fixed on them. The other socket was empty, black like a void. "I hoped you'd come this far," he said, voice rumbling like machines under pressure. "You ruined my trade." Jack stood slowly, blood on his lip. "You deserve worse." The collector ignored the insult, turning his eye toward Syria. "You are Thalinari," he said. "Your kind once sold their own eggs for weapons." Syria didn't flinch. "And your kind builds monsters from children." The collector stood, cables pulling away from his throne. "I don't build monsters," he said softly. "I set them free." He raised a long hand, then the walls around them began to move. Shapes emerged from the stone small bodies. Thin arms, glowing eyes, dozens of them. Children, but not quite. Modified, implanted, altered. They moved like puppets held by strings no one could see. Jack's voice cracked. "Are they real?" Syria's scanner beeped once, then flatlined. No, she whispered. They're gone inside. Just code now. The collector grinned. They failed their buyers, he said, but I found them new purpose. He waved a hand, then the puppet children charged. Jack and Syria fired fast, aiming for the implants. Not the children's hearts. Each hit released a blue spark, shutting one down without damage, but there were too many. They were fast, too fast. One reached Jack. Slashing across his chest with a sharp implant arm, he fell back, gasping. Syria spun, kicking 3 down, then screamed as one leaped onto her back. She stabbed her own shoulder with a stun blade, short-circuiting the puppet clinging to her. They were losing, and the collector was only watching. Enjoying it. Your strength is emotion, he said calmly, and that is your weakness. Jack crawled across the floor, reaching into his vest. He pulled out the charm the little girl had given him, the star-shaped wire. He stared at it, his breath shaking. Then he had an idea. He reached into his wrist console, pulled out the chip number 9 had given him, the core file. It was still glowing faintly. Jack whispered, "Let's try something stupid," and jammed the charm into the chip port. The console blinked, confused, then surged. The charm shorted the firewall and overloaded the program. A new signal burst from Jack's arm, raw, unfiltered, full of chaos, but also memory. Across the room, the puppet children froze, one by one. Their glowing eyes flickered from blue to white, then to color, and then they collapsed, not from damage, but from release. Syria gasped, staring in disbelief. "You gave them back their memories," the collector roared, voice shaking the ground. He lunged forward, no longer calm. Cables shot from his back like spears, aiming straight for Jack's chest, but Syria moved first, throwing herself between them, slashing through the cables. Jack rolled to the side and aimed his weapon, this time at the throne. He fired, hitting the power source embedded in the stone. The entire room shook violently. The ancient systems failed. Sparks flew from the walls. The collector's body jerked, struggling to remain upright, but his legs failed, and he fell to one knee. He looked at Jack, one eye dimming. "I was trying to save them," he said softly. Jack didn't answer. He simply stared. "You turned them into weapons," he whispered. "You forgot they were children." The throne collapsed behind the collector, taking him with it. Stone cracked. Wires snapped, and the lights went out. Jack and Syria stood in the silence, breathing hard. Then a soft beep came from Jack's wrist, a signal the scout ship above was receiving the children. They'd made it out. They were waiting for them. Jack turned to Syria. "Let's go home," he said. But deep down, he knew this fight wasn't over yet. The collector was gone, buried beneath the broken throne and the shattered systems he once controlled. But the station was not done collapsing. Warning lights spun wildly across the chamber walls, flashing red with a sound like distant thunder. Jack helped Syria to her feet, her armor torn and stained with sparks. Above them, support beams groaned, and small explosions echoed deeper in the walls. The entire structure was tearing itself apart. "Can we still reach the hangar?" Jack asked, coughing smoke. Syria checked her map, eyes narrowing. "There's a maintenance tunnel," she replied. "But we have to move now." They ran, the floor shaking beneath them, cables whipped from the ceiling like vines. Falling inches from Jack's face, Syria ducked under crumbling metal, her scanner beeping faster. Behind them, fires chased their footsteps, consuming everything the collector once built. The tunnel narrowed, then split into 2 paths. They chose the left blindly and burst through a final door. Sunlight, blinding, real. They stumbled out into the frozen air, gasping. The children were there, all of them, crowded inside the scout ship, crying, hugging, waiting. The golden-skinned girl saw Jack and ran out first. "You came back," she said, throwing her arms around his waist. Jack knelt, hugging her tightly. "I promised I would," he whispered, voice trembling. The others followed, crowding around Syria, some touching her wounds with gentle fingers. The boy called number 9 held up a datapad. "I started sending the files already," he said. "The galaxy knows now." Jack took the pad and stared at the blinking screen. Dozens of transmissions. Sent out evidence of everything: the cages, the children, the facility. The collector's final words. Syria stood beside him, watching the sky. Ships were coming, fast and loud. Some were patrol cruisers. Others were unknown private vessels, transports, even family crafts. A woman stepped out of the nearest one, eyes wide, hands trembling. She saw a small girl among the rescued, dropped to her knees, and wept. "Rena," she whispered. "My baby." The girl froze, then ran, leaping into her mother's arms. More reunions followed. More tears, more names, more lost lives found again. Not all the children had families waiting, but many did, and the ones who didn't found new ones in that moment. One older alien couple walked over to Jack and Syria. Bowing deeply, "We heard your broadcast." The elder said, "We came to adopt, if any child is still alone." Jack looked at the golden-skinned girl beside him. She stared at the couple with wide eyes, then at Jack. "Will you still visit me?" she asked, voice quiet. Jack smiled gently. "Every week," she nodded, taking the elder woman's hand slowly. But before she walked away, she hugged Jack again and whispered, "You're my hero." Later, as the sun began to set over the frozen plain, Jack stood beside the burned scout ship. Syria stood next to him, her arm in a sling, but her eyes alert. "So," she said, "what now?" Jack stared into the horizon. Wind brushing his face. "We report," he said. "And we keep going." Syria nodded. "There are more collectors out there, then we'll find them," Jack replied. "And we'll stop every last one." Behind them, the children boarded their new transports. Some waved from windows, others smiled quietly. They were going home. Maybe not the one they were born into, but a home where they were loved, protected, and seen as children again, not weapons, not products. Jack looked up at the stars, the same stars he had once thought were cold and empty. Now they felt a little brighter, not because of war or duty, but because, today, something had changed. And it started with just one child whispering "Papa" from a broken crate. Jack smiled. Sometimes, saving the galaxy didn't start with a war. Sometimes, it started with a promise to a child.